Lakshmi, I hope you have already given the sharing facility to Professor, So I take this opportunity to welcome everyone in the next session of Friday Fundamental, in which we have been inviting, acknowledged and renowned speakers, and also talking on the hot topics and also the relevant topics and also the recent topics for the benefit of all of our members. And today's topic is very, very interesting, which is the current inflationary trends in India, causes, concerns, and cures by Dr. Agnello Menzies. So I welcome you, sir, for this session, and I take this opportunity to introduce you to the audience. Professor Agnello Menzies, which is, lovingly, he's also called Aggie.
Yes.
He has done a PhD in social and economic geography of urban poor, rag pickers in Mumbai. He's also MA in economics, Mumbai University, and he is the principal of St. Xavier's College, which is an autonomous college in Mumbai. He was from 2015 to 2018. He's a recognized teacher of Mumbai University for MA degree in economics with and associate. He has been associate professor in economics in St. Xavier. He has held various positions. He has been the warden of St. Xavier's College Hostel since 2010 and coordinator of social involvement program in St. Xavier's College. He is currently the visiting faculty in JBIMS Mumbai, teaching economics, and Sydenham Institute of Management Studies, Research and Entrepreneurship Education, and also Xavier's Institute of Management and Research and Xavier's Institute of Communication. And he has a vast experience in the field. Sir, I would request you to take the session, and I'm sure all our people will be benefited, as a layman on this subject, and also it will be a very enriching experience. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rajesh. I would like the session not to be a monologue. At any point of time, you need a clarification, or you, more importantly, you do not agree with the way I'm putting it, I would be only too happy if you intervened. But if you're going off the target, please give me the right to tell you that we will take it up a little later. Okay, so let's not just segregate it and say the last half an hour will be the Q&A. We can have that. But at any point of time, clarification is required or additions have to be made to what I'm saying. I'll be only too pleased to listen to what you have to say. When Dr. Lagate asked me, could I speak on anything? My immediate reaction was, let me speak on the current inflationary trends in India. And just to be poetic, I said causes, concerns, and cures. That's the CCC. I wanted to, I'm sure you know when I'm talking about causes, I'm looking at the origins, I'm looking at the perpetuating factors. When I look at concerns, I'm looking at the issues that emerge out because of this. And a better word than cure for such a lecture would have been remedies, the mitigative policies that can take place. So with this background, let me tell you the agenda of my sharing with you. I want to start by telling you that I'm going to intersperse this session with a little spattering of theory, because I think that would make us understand the dynamics of inflation better, and therefore our engagement with inflation, the proposals that we make to counter it would be based on theory and not just on hearsay or very whimsically we keep talking about inflation. So I'm going to intersperse it with some theory. I'm not, if you ask me what's the percentage, maybe about 20% of the entire talk I will based on theory, and then the remaining will be on the empirical evidence that will be brought to fore in the course of my discussion with you. So I begin with telling you what is inflation, conceptualize it, how is it measured, and then go on to look at what do we in economics, how do we in economics look at inflation, understand its dynamics. And with that kind of a backdrop, we then bring to the fore the empirical evidence that's available and juxtapose that on the theory that I would have been creating in our minds. So I want to start by making sure that we have this in place, the concept. So we're on the same page. And I want to make it very clear, we are not discussing inflation from its purely sociological implication, the political implication. We are looking at it as an economic phenomena. So if it's going to be an economic phenomena, please be ready to constantly hear the terms demand and supply. And of course, I'm talking in terms of not microeconomics, this is macroeconomics. So we are going to be looking at basically aggregate demand and aggregate supply. But what makes inflation a phenomenon that we are concerned about is that it needs a marked rise in prices. And when I say prices, it must be the general prices. Somewhere in the middle of our session, I'll show you the total outlay that the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation brings to the table, all the various commodities. And you will notice that every commodity that will be put up on the screen would be a commodity that somewhere or the other through our life we have engaged with. So that is the meaning of general prices. So it is not a spurt in the demand for raincoats, which is going to push the price of raincoats up from next month. That is not inflation. Inflation has to be all commodities that concern human life will be affected by this phenomena. And it has to be consistent. And the consistency should be over a significant period of time, maybe 2 quarters, half a year. And if that happens, then we can really give this phenomena a stamp of being an inflationary situation. I remember as a student years ago, studying in Xavier's, my teacher taught us this, and it hit me like a ton of bricks, because I remember it even now. You wake me up from my sleep and I'll be able to tell you this very cryptic way of defining or describing inflation. And this is what my teacher brought to class. And he said, inflation, it's nothing but too much money chasing too few goods. You know, when I say this to students who are much, much younger than we are, I tell them, memorize this, because it comes so handy for your essays, so handy for your elocutions, so handy at debates, because this 6 words, if you want 7, captures the phenomenon of inflation in its true essence. Too much money, what is that? Aggregate demand. Too few goods, aggregate supply. And you can clearly see from the adjectives used, we are saying demand is greater than supply. And that is a no-brainer. It's common sense and not simply economic logic that will tell you when demand exceeds supply, there will be a problem. So through this discussion, what I would like to ask each of us to be engaged with intellectually is to look at the components of demand, to look at what is changing the demand configuration, and to also look at the supply configuration, both in its quantity as well as in its content. So aggregate demand greater than aggregate supply is the fundamental aspect of inflation. You know, if we were really doing a course on macroeconomics, this would have been the 4th chapter after having studied the flows of the economic flows, national income, and business cycles, and then we go to inflation in that sequence. And why do we take it up in that sequence? Because we need to remind ourselves that inflation is not simply price rising. Inflation is not simply aggregate demand more than aggregate supply, but it is connected with a very positive term that every one of us desires to have with us, and that is prosperity. Inflation per se, let's say price rising, has to be understood from 2 points of view. One, there is an inflationary trend, that means prices are rising, which can be tonic in nature, medicinal nature. Okay, Rajesh from the pharma world, I'm talking about inflation being a tonic for an economy. But then too much of anything is bad. And so also with inflation, that tonic inflation can deteriorate and become toxic. So there is tonic inflation, which every economy strives to achieve. And then there's toxic inflation, which every economy tries to avoid. The bottom line of what I'm trying to share with you is, if as a policy maker, you think of destroying inflation, please do not do it. And the evidence I want to bring to the table and tell you, listen, inflation must be there in a system, is the target inflation band, the tolerable inflation band that RBI talks about, is not from 0 to a high number. It is from 2 to a high number, with the median value being 4. So you've got to remember that even RBI, the central bank of our country, talks in terms of there must be a basic inflation existing in the economy. In the course of our discussion, we'll take up why that's so. And this rise in the prices both activates the business class, because it supports their profitability, and it does not impede the consumption capacity of households. Whoever goes to the bazaar from your family is not going to come back all up in arms and saying the prices have got so high and so forth. And it's an annual increment. You don't even feel it. It's like adding a bucket of water to an ocean. The ocean won't feel it. And therefore, that would be tonic inflation. But when that tonic inflation starts converting into becoming something toxic, because aggregate demand starts increasing at an exponential rate and supply cannot catch up, then there's a problem that will take place. When aggregate demand increases, we have to connect that to a nation doing well. And that nation is doing well because more income is being generated, more employment is being generated, so people can demand more. But here is the problem with the demand and supply variables. By default, demand can change, and I'm using a neutral word, I'm not saying increase or decrease. Demand can change instantaneously. I lose my job, bang, my money is gone, my demand goes plummeting down. I find a 100 rupee note on the floor. I try to find out who is the owner, nobody is claiming it. And let's say finders are keepers, my purchasing power has gone up by 100 rupees instantaneously. But supply, by the very nature of its makeup, supply needs to fructify. Supply needs to gestate. So there's always going to be a time lag between aggregate demand and aggregate supply. And it is this time lag that becomes the source of inflationary pressures. So as demand keeps increasing and increasing at a very fast rate, increasing as instantaneously as possible, I get credit from a bank, I've got purchasing power. I go to buy TV, and all of us go to buy TV because all of us have got credit. There's not enough of TV for all of us. And the shopkeeper begins to tell us, listen, the one who is ready to pay the highest price will get the TV. So you can see aggregate demand, where it is more than aggregate supply, will only naturally pump up prices. So that is what I'm trying to show you over here, that when a nation begins to prosper, when it's on the upswing of a business cycle, and more people are getting access to purchasing power, and I'm being very, very conscious that I'm not using the word money and I'm saying purchasing power, because purchasing power can easily come through credit and not through the salaries that you and I earn, because that is because I work, I'm being paid. And because I work, I've contributed to supply of the economy. But when I get credit money and I'm able to step out to buy, I am buying without having contributed to supply. So you can see how the inequality between aggregate demand and aggregate supply is fueled more and more by credit. And I'm laying this point down as a proposition because I needed to understand why the monetary authority of an economy is always at the forefronts of fighting inflation. And if more and more money comes out, if like what India experienced after we converted our economy into a globalized world, into a liberal space, we had the middle class growing, we had a lot of demand building in, supply didn't catch up, or even if it catches up late, and the inflationary gap builds up, creating pressures on prices. So that is what I wanted to remember, that this wonderful word, this very positive word, prosperity, has to be probed into because it carries the seed of converting tonic inflation into toxic inflation. You know, if you go back to the 1929 crisis in America, the Great Depression, America was at its peak, doing very, very well. And it is that doing very, very well that actually became the problem for the American economy, and it collapsed. So prosperity has to be managed. Inflation can be managed if we manage prosperity. Here is another point I want to raise, and that is inflation should not be equated with price volatility. And therefore, if you go back to the first patch that I've created on the screen, I have not connected inflation to price fluctuations. Price fluctuations could be whimsical. It may not generally have a trend. A particular instance or a particular situation may make the price change in a particular direction. But when we talk in terms of inflation, we are talking about something that's embedded in the system, something that is systemic, something that is creating a rot from within and not a one-off that will make the prices change. So you can use the term price volatility for the stock market, but we cannot use this word in the discussion of inflation. Okay, so erraticism, erratic movements of the prices is not what we are discussing. We are discussing the trend of prices to move upwards over a period of time and significantly upwards. Now, when I say significantly, remember we'll use what RBI has already spoken in terms of 2 to 6% is the tolerable inflation that we can bear, that policy can control, that the nation won't have to be bothered about, and that would also be useful for the business world. Now, given this background, that inflation is marked rise in general prices over a long period of time, or, and I prefer this one, too much money chasing too few goods. Let's look at how we measure it. Okay, I won't spend much time. I'll just give you that thing because you would like to know how does the RBI, how does the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation, how do they come up with that figure that they say, no? The figure that has startled all of us is 7.79%. How did they reach that figure? And that's why I'm sort of sharing with you the various ways in which you can calculate inflation. It's basically the idea called index numbers. So we have the simple index number method. And look at how simple it is. No, there are no weights involved. It is simply, we look at the current prices and we look at the sum total of the base prices of the commodities that you're concerned with. I'm sure many of you know this, but let me remind us, you know, when we do a functional fraction, the numerator and the denominator have a functional relationship. Remember when we were doing, those of us who know calculus, we say y is a function of x. Y is a function of x. What are we saying? We are saying when x changes, y will change. And then when you differentiate that, you say dy by dx. Look at the structure. In the numerator, you have dy, delta y, because of delta x. And we are saying when x changes, y changes. That means the numerator in functional fractions, the numerator carries the effect. The denominator carries the cause. So look at this equation that is put up in front of you over here, this formula. The numerator is the sum total of current prices, which we are saying is so formed, is what it is now because of the past prices. So the past prices denominator the cause of the current prices, which is in the numerator, which is the effect. Okay, as we look at these formulae, and I'm sure now you can look at various formulae that you have studied across the sciences. If it's a functional formula, that means you're saying there's a dependent variable and an independent variable, then we inevitably have to put it this way, effect upon cause. So this is what the simple index number method is telling us, that the present prices is the consequence of those past prices that have formed the base for the current prices, and the into 100 is just for percentizing this whole figure. So this is simple index number, no weights involved. Then comes Laspier. He is an economist who is also a high flown statistician. And he talks in terms of weights. Look at these parts. Q0, which is the quantity in the base period, which he uses as a weight. He uses as a bias. But in economics, how do we interpret this? You know, that's why I told you we study inflation after having studied national income. If you look at the national income concept, it is nothing but the value of your overall production in the country. Now, if you look at the denominator, it is nothing but the summation of the prices of the base period into the quantities consumed in that base period. That would be the national income. Okay, if you want, you can use the word GDP over here very loosely. The GDP of your economy in the base period, which becomes the cause of the current period's situation. I said situation, I did not say national income, I did not say GDP, because see what we are doing, it's hybridization. We are taking the current prices and engaging with the quantities that we consumed in the past. But we are just trying to see how would your expenditure pan itself out if with the same denominator amount, P0, Q0, you were to engage with the same quantity but at a different price level. So naturally, if the numerator is more than the denominator, simple arithmetic will tell you that when the numerator is more than the denominator, the answer will be greater than 1, and we will say prices have begun to rise. Laspier's index number formula is important because the figure 7.79% is calculated and estimated with the help of Laspier's formula. So whether you're looking at CPI or whether you're looking at WPI, Consumer Price Index or Wholesale Price Index, Laspier's formula is used in that calculation. WPI and CPI will be a part of my discussion a little later. Then we have Paste's, which is also called the deflator in national income deflator. Now look at the difference between Laspier's denominator and Paste's denominator. Paste's numerator is the current national income, is the current GDP. But we are saying that is an effect. And we want to know why is the situation such today? And when you ever look at for a why, you look out for a reason. So the cause, which is in the denominator, is not exactly a cause in Paste's formula. And that is why if you're explaining this to anybody, why do economies across the world, whether it's America, whether it's China, or whether it's India, we use Laspier to calculate that figure? Because of the structure being correctly so that the denominator causes the numerator to happen. Whereas in Pasteur's, you cannot. And then there is a formula which is called the Fisher's ideal index number formula, ideal index number formula. And I remember when I was a student, I was expecting my teacher to tell me that India uses the ideal index number technique to bring out those figures, which in those days used to come out every Friday. And I really was disappointed when my teacher told us, no, we use Laspier's formula. It took me a lot of time. It took me 3 years into teaching to understand why Fisher is not compatible academically and also from the point of view of reality as much as Laspier's is, because Fisher's is just a compromise. If you look at the first part of Fisher, it is nothing but Laspier, and the second part of Fisher is nothing but Pasteur. So you can see it's a basic compromise that he's doing. He's knocking out the biases, but in the course of knocking out the biases, he does not bring to the table what I was trying to explain to you structurally, that the denominator, and over here there are two denominators in Fisher, the denominators have to be the cause of what the current situation is, which is depicted by the numerator. That's it. Okay, I'm not going to go into any mathematical numerical example, but do carry it in your mind as we go to this time with me, that those figures that I'll be engaging you with are figures that have been calculated through Laspier's index number technique. From those techniques, we can get various inflation rates from 2 to 3% per annum. I'm sure all of you knew the abbreviation, percent per annum, right up to 20 to 30% per month. So that is not a typo, it is per month. And that is hyperinflation. You know, something in our current times, what Zimbabwe suffered under Mugabe, what Venezuela is yet suffering from because of dictatorship. So hyperinflation, or what Germany experienced, and then guess what? They elected a Hitler to lead them out of the hyperinflation. So hyperinflation is not something for fictional writing. It happens, okay? And if you're not careful, inflation can go into the hyper mode. But we will talk in terms of something that is more, real, and that's creeping inflation, which, if you want to call it, you can give it the label of being tonic inflation. It's an inflation that enthuses and brings about enthusiasm, brings about vibrancy in the production world, in the investment world, because the producers will make some amount of profit and consumers do not feel the pinch, because 2 to 3% per annum over 365 days gets very watered down, and the purse does not get strained by the kind of financials that we are discussing over here. And then begins the time when the monetary authority has to wake up and say, hey, listen, let's wave a red flag, because creeping inflation is now entering that zone. Exactly what is happening in the country today. Walking inflation, okay, it's tolerable because you can look at it and you'll see, as per RBI's tolerable band, it falls in that range between 2 and 6%. But it is a wake-up call that, listen, there is something going amiss. Either the demand is too much, and when I'm saying too much, I'm not saying, take away food from people's plates or make people live in huts. I'm saying that demand is too much, meaning supply is not able to catch up with it. Okay, and that mismatch is going to create a problem, because walking inflation can soon become running and galloping inflation. And you can look at the rates. Okay? India experienced around 25% of inflation, and then an emergency in India was declared. Okay, because our prices had gone for a toss. I'm trying to show you that, listen, when your inflation begins to hover around the running rate, the governance dispensation, the government has to wake up and take action, take corrective action. And when I'm saying corrective action, I hope we really begin to appreciate the saying, prevention is better than cure. It's that equivalent of shutting the door when the horses have bolted. When the walking inflation takes place, when you're seeing your inflation rate slowly walking towards the running pace, the authorities have to take action. Because as you see towards the end of my discussion with you, inflation is painful. Inflation is stressful. Inflation can strain not only people, but also an economy. So here are red flags that every government should have, should be conscious of. That when the inflation rate moves towards a running rate, the economy has to take corrective action at that point of time. And hopefully, when they are in the walking towards running stage, the economy takes up preventive actions. And again, I'm reminding all of us, prevention is better than cure. Theoretical dynamics. I told you there will be a little bit of theory, and it will be nice for us, all of us to know this. Even those of us who've never done macroeconomics or even economics, nice to know this. Because then when you read the newspapers, it will make more sense to you. Yes, there's a duplication of graphs. There's a total duplication of graphs. Both of the graphs, left-hand side and right-hand side, have the same axes. Aggregate supply is the curve that is facing you. It's a fractured curve. The green part has some elasticity, meaning slope to this. And then there is a perfectly inelastic aspect, which will not change the x-axis, and yet the y-axis amount is changing. Continuing with what I was sharing with us, that the denominator is the cause and the numerator is the effect. And I'm going back to what we write in calculus in derivation, dy by dx, where x is the cause and y is the effect. It dawned on me, maybe 20 years into teaching, why my school teacher told me when I was a kid, memeing the whole class, that this horizontal line is called the x-axis and this one is called the vertical axis. X-axis and the y-axis. And I said, okay, two alphabets, x and y. It's only when I began to understand this mathematical connection between x and y that I began to realize that my teacher was actually trying to tell me that on the horizontal axis, we measure cause. That is why it's the x-axis. And on the vertical, we measure effect. So whenever I look at a graph, one of the first is, what are the axes? What is the cause? What is the effect? And if you look at it over here, look at what the relationship is saying. It is saying the general price levels is a function of national income. That's national income. Huh? So when income grows, general prices will grow. When income reduces, general prices will reduce. So now you can see why I told you it will be nice if we engage with these graphs and then go into the empirical evidence that history throws at us. So here is the green segment telling us that as the national income increases, and remember, national income is increasing, employment is increasing. And when I say employment is increasing, I'm not necessarily saying that 10 more people have got jobs. What I'm saying is, what I could be saying is that the existing people who are employed are getting more. Today's papers have carried I think the Yes Bank or something. That guy is going to get an 88% raise in his income and going to get some 74 crores or something like that. So can you see it would be a jump from year to year?
It was
Infosys, gentlemen. Yeah. Okay. And that jump would be shown over here. Okay. So as income grows, and again, I'm reminding all of us, it does not mean that employment is increasing in physical numbers. It means that employment is increasing in monetary value. Okay. So as income grows, people are able to buy more because they can spend more. They got the money. And as they buy more, the prices will begin to rise because that is basic fundamental economics, the relation with demand and supply. But in any economy, and this is imaginative in the sense, I'm not saying it is not real, but I'm saying it never happens, and therefore I'm saying imaginative. There comes a point where an economy reaches the full employment mark. Another clarity, when we say employment, we normally think in terms of human beings being employed. But in macroeconomics, we talk about employment of all factors, land, labor, capital. I can't say entrepreneurship, because entrepreneurs are not hired. Entrepreneurs are self-employed people, so we don't take them to account. Land, labor, capital. So can you see, as you use more and more of labor, land, and capital that's existing in your economy, your national income will begin to grow. People can spend more. That will be captured with prices rising. And in the theoretical framework, an economy can reach the full employment mark. Okay, so imagine that full employment mark is being reached. Students normally ask me, especially undergraduate students, can you give us a picture of a country where this could have happened? Full employment mark, no wastage of resources. And to give them a very far-fetched example, which may not be very far-fetched if you look at the reality of it. And I tell them, in the current world, it could be North Korea, a highly dictatorial economy based on the ego of that dictator. And he would want everybody and everything to be working. Okay? Or the Soviet Union, if you remember that USSR, which now Putin is trying to reconstruct. The USSR, no, under communism, everybody has to work. Or under Mao Zedong, China, everybody had to work. And that's the example I would give them as a model that you can imagine that history has at some point of time or the other actually experienced on the face of this earth. Everybody and everything employed for, and that's a euphemism, for the good of the nation. And you all know it's for the good of the ego of the dictator. So in a democracy, you're not going to reach that point. Reaching full employment is a possibility only under dictatorship, where a human being, let's call that person a citizen, has no right to decide what he or she could do with self or with the properties at his or her disposal. And that is where we talk in terms of capitalism and those kind of things. Normally, I'm not saying only, normally, capitalism and democracies go together. Now, as the economy grows, you can hit the full employment mark. Once you hit the full employment mark, see what it is saying, see what the maths is saying. It is simply saying that even if income does not increase, you're decoding that as employment not being generated. Even if employment does not increase, prices will keep rising upwards. So this is the aggregate supply curve. The aggregate demand curve is a downward sloping curve. I'm putting it up over there. And I'll be doing one of these two J's at the time. So I'm taking up the left-hand side one. This is the aggregate demand curve. On this single aggregate supply curve of a nation, I have brought in numerous aggregate demand curves, which is downward sloping. And you can see where aggregate demand intersects with aggregate supply, that would be an equilibrium point. And at the equilibrium point, you have got a particular equilibrium level of employment. By equilibrium over here, I'm saying aggregate demand equal to aggregate supply. And I'm sure all of you have noticed that this y-axis, the x-axis, this x-axis is a binary from O, from origin to y1, is the value of the national income, the amount of the employment taking place in the economy, and y1 to fe is unemployment. And that is what I meant by saying that the x-axis shows a binary. It shows employment and it shows what value of unemployment is existing in this economy. So as aggregate demand increases, which India experienced post 1991, with the middle class growing, you had more and more demand building up. We had more and more opportunities for getting credit Again, I'm not using the word money, I'm saying credit. And I've got my, and then I slowly, the middle class began to financialize. Again, I'm not using the word money, began to financialize their consumption. And as demand began to grow, new jobs were being created. Notice I'm moving away, Y2 is away from the origin. Unemployment is reducing. But this is what one of the principles of macroeconomics says is, if you want growth, OY1 to OY2, if you want growth, you will have to be ready to bear with inflation. It's body shadow. Okay, they go together. Growth will bring inflation. And I'm reminding you of what I said before, prosperity and inflation are bedfellows. They go together. Okay, so here you can see that as national income grows, inflation begins to grow. And the villain, if you want to use that term, the villain over here is demand. Therefore, we call this phenomenon demandful inflation. You may have read on the newspapers describing a situation and saying, hey, listen, that's a demand side problem. Yeah, this is what I'm showing you. It's a demand side problem. You know, between D1, between AD1, AD2, and AD3, the economy is able to feed its additional demand because the green line is elastic. It can bring in demand. It can bring in supply. The demand may not be unfulfilled. But look at AD4. AD4 is not only high demand, but it is demand which cannot be fulfilled. And in the very true sense of the word, when you look at inflation, especially in the realm of galloping inflation, hyperinflation, this configuration of AD4 with a perfectly inelastic aggregate supply would be the recipe for inflation that is going to destroy this nation. So every economy has to ensure two things. One, that the aggregate demand is kept under control, and the aggregate supply must try to meet the aggregate demand. When you look at the other one, you will notice the green line moving. Now let's get this geometry very clear. When the green line, the aggregate supply, elastic slope, the slopedness of the curve, when it starts moving upwards away from the x-axis, it is telling us that supply is reducing. Supply is reducing. Get that very clear. The supply situation with OE1 is much, much better than P2S2, and P2S2 supply situation is better than P3S3. So when an economy begins to have a supply crunch, and you get that data, you regress that data, and you convert it into a graph, this is what it would look like. So can you see from the time Ukraine was attacked to today, Ukraine's supply would have been gradually and now very, very speedily decreasing. So if you get data out of Ukraine before the invasion began and now, you will see that at the start of or before the invasion, the supply situation had been the lowest green. And now it must be a green somewhere over here because of the total destruction that's taking place. And that is why we talk in terms of the futility of war. No? War can actually destroy standing productive capacities. Now on this, I'm deliberately going to put in only one demand curve because I want to show you that it is a supply side problem. And on the left-hand side, it's a demand side problem. And as usual, where the demand and supply interact, we get the equilibrium points. The perpendicular heights are telling you the inflation, are telling you the price, height, the price level. It's called cost push. Now here is where I want you to engage with me. Between demand pull and cost push, if you are the finance minister or let's say the governor of the Reserve Bank of India or of a central bank of some country, between the two, which one would you prefer to be handling? And before you answer me, I want you to remember that I'm asking you to choose between the devil and the deep blue sea. Both are bad, but which one is worse? Come on, anybody. Are you waiting for the monitor? I mean, Rajesh, are you monitoring this thing? Moderating?
Yes, I am.
No, I mean, anyone could come in, no? I don't know whether they have the... I don't know the protocol, Rajesh, but let them talk. No?
So normally during the session, they will put the questions in the chat box. So I have been requesting if they have any, they can put in the chat box, and then at the end we answer together. So yeah, I can read out, or
no, I thought it would be an interactive session, because I need to know what the mindset of the audience is, of the hearers are.
That in between you can ask them.
Then I'm asking between demand pull and cost push.
So there is a.
Is there someone?
There's someone, Dr. Balamurugan. He has said that demand pull
is easier. Can I talk to doctor?
Dr. Balamurugan, can you unmute yourself and speak?
Yes, Professor.
Hi, Doctor.
Professor, good evening, Professor.
Good evening.
Yes, Professor. As per my knowledge, demand pull is easier, I believe, Professor.
Can you talk a little into the mic? I'm not able to hear you very well.
Yes, Professor. As per my knowledge, I believe demand pull is easier to handle, Professor.
And what makes demand cost push a no-no?
Demand and supply is like we can control to some extent.
I'm giving you a hint, doctor. Look at the x-axis of both of them.
Yes, Professor. Yes, Professor.
Look at the x-axis and tell me, why is your answer correct? Demand pull is easier to handle than cost push.
I think demand pull, the number of factors involved is very less, whereas cost is there are multiple factors.
Yes, I'm going to say yes to you.
Professor, that is what I know. I can judge. I'm learning from your session. This is what I can understand, Professor.
Okay. Anybody else want to try before I come in with
the answer? I think that sorry, this what you call the employment levels are different. I mean, smaller. Unemployment level is smaller in demand pull inflation than it is in cost push.
Yes, that's the insight I wanted. That's the observation I wanted to be made. So cost push is costly. Look at this. As the prices are rising, the employment is reducing. Indapal, that's what you were saying, no?
Yes, yes.
As the prices rise, the cost. And the logic is very simple. The rationale is very simple. You don't hire me as a lecturer because I'm very, very expensive. And if you don't hire me as a lecturer because the cost of education is going high, can you see I'll be rendered unemployed? Okay, so cost push is something we got to be careful about. And yeah, somebody is saying?
No, sorry.
And when I bring forth the data of the Indian situation, I want this picture in your mind. When we start discussing the Indian data, the empirical evidence, whether it's demand pull or cost push, what has changed over the last 4 or 5 years? Okay, pandemic would be an intervening event, but what exactly has changed in the muscle power of the Indian economy? So we have demand pull, we have cost push, and I need you to understand that especially with this for the classroom, as a teacher, I would teach this demand pull and cost push in silos, because I want the student to understand the dynamics of demand pull and the dynamics of cost push. But the reality is they actually feed into each other. And economics has named that as the factor reward price spiral. If you look at the original, this idea came up in the 1800s. And in the 1800s, the economists were very, very anti-labor people. And therefore, Charles Dickens writes about the misery of the laboring class and all those things, like Oliver Twist and David Copperfield. And the original title was Wage Price Spiral. I believe that we do not have to damn ourselves as workers and say only we, the laboring class, creates a price problem, but everybody creates a price problem. You saw what we were sharing in the beginning of this talk. The Infosys guy getting a huge increase in his income. And please remember that increase in income that he's going to be receiving, the money is not going to come from heaven. It's not going to fall from heaven. It's going to come from the consumers. Okay, and the consumers are going to pay a higher price, and therefore I prefer to use this factor reward price spiral. The landlord could charge me more and not just the laborer, or the bank could charge me more and not just the laborer. And therefore, I'm using a neutral term, factor reward price spiral. It goes like this, a spiral. If there's an increase in the general price level, then people like you and me who are labeling will ask for more wages, will ask for higher wages, will ask for higher returns. And when it's given to us, in the book of accounts, it'll go down as an increase in cost of production. And because of an increase in cost of production, there'll be an increase in general price levels. And you know why it is called a spiral. And it goes on and on and on and on. Just to make you think, I have this picture, but I'm not showing it to you just now. Would you want an upward spiral with the peak up? Or would you want it to be upward spiral with the base up? Okay, think of a cone. I'm talking about a cone. Should it go peaking upwards? That means the broad base and then peaking upward like a mountain top? Or should it be ulta? The base dangling up in the sky. Okay, think about it. What kind of a spiral would be useful for an economy? And then, because we have some theoretical knowledge about what inflation is about, then we go into, in a normal class situation, we would have discussed the mitigation policies. And the three layers are telling you that there are three different authorities that are responsible for mitigating inflationary pressures. The first responsibility, when I say first, don't think in terms of priority. I'm just saying number one and A, is the Reserve Bank of India in India, or the Central Bank, or the Fed Reserve Bank of England, the monetary authority. They have to bring out policies. The second layer is concerned with the finance ministry. That department has to bring out policies. And the third layer is the commerce ministry, commercial policies. Okay. Now, I'm separating them, but they all work in tandem. And when Indian data is presented to us, you will see it will be both the governor, Das, you'll find Nirmala Sitharaman, and you'll also find Piyush Ghosh, all of them talking about how they are going about controlling inflation. Towards the end of our session, we will answer these questions. We'll fill in these gaps. Okay, just I'm not filling in the gap, but I'm telling you, there are three different authorities that are obliged, that are mandated to control inflation. And here is something, because I use the word obliged and mandated, here is something I would like to share with you from my reading. And what I have picked up is the central bank of a country in India, Reserve Bank of India, is sworn, is mandated, is obliged to control inflation. That is the number one priority of a central bank. Your job is to control inflation. The other players can become collateral players. And given that thought, we slowly come to the Indian economy. And to understand the Indian economy data that I'll present to you, you've got to know what is the CPI, the Consumer Price Index, and the Wholesale Price Index. You read, I'm not reading them for you. They will be on the screen for at least a few minutes. So reading time will be enough. You read on your own. But what I want you to remember is that the Wholesale Price Index excludes services. It's without the services. And now I wanted to understand why, when RBI brings out figures, it brings out CPI figures. And especially in a globalized world. Not the world that at least I don't know what are your ages, I have grown in. I've grown in an India that was, to use words from Guru Charan Das, an LPQ India, and today is an LPG India. LPG, I'm sure you know, liberalization, privatization, globalization. And Guru Charan Das, in his book, India Unbound, says it very well that the socialist India that I grew up in is LPQ, license, permits, and quotas. So in the license, permit, and quota Raj, you could have a WPI being the base of your calculation. But in a liberalized India, you've got to have CPI, because services have to be taken into account. You call this headline inflation. These are terms that will be in the newspaper. So I said, let me share it with all of us. WPI is called producer level inflation. Both of them make use of last year. Remember, numerator and denominator are different. Denominator is the past, is the base period GDP. And the number of commodities that they engage with to reach this figure that they throw at us. CPI uses 299. I'll show you that on a slide. And wholesale use 676 commodities, but minus services. Since 2014, CPI has become the official base. WPI has been there since long time, even before independence. What RBI does today is it uses CPI, both rural and urban. I'll show you that in the next slide. Rural and urban averages the two and comes up with those figures that are shown to you and me. Whereas WPI looks at prices at the gate. Okay, bulk prices at the factory or farm gate. RBI uses it for monetary policy, and WPI is used more in the commercial and industrial world. It's called the headline core or print CPI, but here's the caution that you have to have when you read these figures, that the headline inflation, okay, that means I'm assuming this is headline inflation, is without FNF, without fuel and food, because these are the most heavy commodities, heavy components of calculation. You'll see that when I show you the page. Just to show you the layout of CPI, there is CPI for workers. It is used for the DA calculation. I'm sure some of us over here, like me, our salaries are attached to a DA. They make use of the CPI, Industrial Workers Index. This is rural, and these are outdated, they're not being used anymore. I'm talking about CPI rural and CPI agricultural laborers. What the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation uses is CPI of urban population. It's all the states and the entire nation. Look at the limited amount of states for rural and for agricultural, but all states is for CPI, and therefore the DA, the dearness allowance, comes out of this. And then you have the CPI for rural population, like what I just now shared with you. We are using CPI, which is a combo today of urban and rural. And that's why in the previous slide I had said CPI U plus R. One of the major macroeconomists who became governor and had to prematurely demit office, Urjit Patel, he was a deputy of that extremely brilliant macroeconomist, Raghuram Rajan. As deputy governor, Urjit Patel created these ideas that today comes up in the newspapers. He spoke in terms of the robustness of an economy, the robustness of the Indian economy will be if it can maintain the target rate of CPI, which is 4% plus or minus 2. And therefore, I kept telling you the band is 2% and 6%. And he also puts up a red flag and says, if the inflation rate goes above 6.2%, growth will be hampered. Now, remember what I showed you in that picture. Growth is national income growing. And for national income to grow, you require employment. For employment to grow, you require investments. For investments to take place, you require financials. You require finance. And for finance to be actually taken, you need to have the incentive of a low interest rate. A low interest rate will fire in demand-pull inflation. Okay, and that is where I'm going to be engaging you with when we come to that part. So keep in mind that Urjit Patel, who prematurely demitted office as governor, he's brought in the idea of the targeted rate of CPI, and he put up a red flag and said anything above 6.2% will be bad for the growth of an economy. I may, in the course of our discussion, use the word and use the abbreviation NIGR, National Income Growth Rate. I'll be talking about the same thing, economic growth. Yeah. You tell me, is there anything on this list, anything that you have not consumed, either knowingly or unknowingly? I'm saying that because of layer number 2. Some of you may say, no, I don't consume those kind of things. Therefore, I'm saying knowingly or unknowingly. Okay, if you had Benadryl for your cold, please remember you're taking an intoxicant. Rajesh can vouch for what I said just now. Is there anything that you have not consumed? So now you can see when the figures come out, it is really engaging with everything that you and I consume. Whether you're a vegetarian or non-vegetarian, it's there. And you can understand weights. No? You can see food having such a high weightage in the calculation of the price. With that much of sort of theorizing, let me bring you the empirical evidence of India. So here's the shocker that came up recently, that from a 6.2, and remember what Urjit Patel said, anything above 6.2 is going to harm growth. Somebody's talking to me. Rajesh, somebody's talking to me.
That's what I was observing. Can everybody put it on mute? People who are not talking.
I'll go ahead.
Sorry, sir. Yes.
So 7.9, it's alarming. Huh? Why? It's the fastest pace since the 8.3% we had in 2014. The retail inflation has been the highest since October 2019. Normally retail of food, I'm talking about. Inflation rate has gone upwards for the last 7 months. The tolerance band, remember tolerance band of 2 to 6, has been breached 4 continuous months. And this happened even prior to Ukraine, because, and I'm bringing this up because Ukraine is becoming an excuse for many countries. No, our supply chain has gone for a toss. Not to deny that it's happening, please. But these were problems that were emerging even before all these supply chains, broke down, or before Ukraine was invaded and all these sanctions were being put in place. Food inflationary pressures has grown from 0.68% in 21 to 8.38% in 22. You can count the number of months and you can see through the pandemic that inflation caused by food has created a problem. Now you can take it down to if production was not taking place, and with supply not taking place, you saw that picture. If supply does not take place, the green curve goes upwards, the prices will rise. And this was something we were really not expecting to happen, that the rural inflation rate has been higher than the urban inflation rate. So one wonders whether it is that return migration, where I'm sure all of you, with a lot of heaviness in your heart, you saw those workers trudging back on foot home when the lockdown was suddenly imposed on the country. Okay, so one wonders whether that can be connected to this rural inflation for this period being higher than urban inflation, and whether the urbanites like you and me have suddenly gone into a mood of abstaining, reducing, becoming more health conscious and those kind of things. And I do hope you can hear my sarcasm. State-wise, yeah, I put the India mark. And this is an interesting thing to be looking at, especially those of you who are given into research, given into reading. Why are some states better off than other states? Especially look at the state of Tamil Nadu, okay, where they've got a brilliant finance minister. And when I'm saying brilliant, I'm not worshipping him because he is coming from abroad. He is good. okay, like a Raghuram Rajan kind of thing. Look at how Tamil Nadu has fared, okay, under his leadership. I'm not talking in terms of BNK, I'm not talking in politics, I'm talking about the brain power that he brings to the finance ministry. Okay? Why are certain states, which are in darker pink, having a higher inflation rate than other states? Okay? Tamil Nadu would be a good example to look at. I remember in the 1980s and 90s, we used to talk in terms of the Kerala model of growth. Money coming in from the Gulf and Kerala is growing. The money coming from the Gulf has reduced, but Kerala is yet appearing to be doing well in spite of a high pandemic rate. This is the period, because I said recent. Okay, so I need to define the word recent, 8 years. And you can see the up and down. After 2019 has gone up a little dip, pandemic time, because consumption would definitely have fallen down because of lockdowns. And then that spurt. This I brought out of curiosity to show you that there can be a positive correlation existing between WPI and CPI. Okay, and WPI is growing at a very, very fast pace. April 22. Look at that rate. It's nearly double the CPI rate. And mind you, this is without services. Huh? The rate at which consumption is taking place. And when I'm saying this consumption, I'm talking about bulk. Now remember, you and I don't have bulk consumption. We don't consume in bulk, but we consume as a result of bulk being sold. Okay, and that bulk then keeps on disaggregating itself into retail. Month on month, I managed to get this data. So I said, let me share it with you now. Rajesh is being recorded, no? So this is automatically being saved to for the others to see, no?
Yes, yes. So yeah. The presentation will be uploaded on YouTube channel of BMA.
Very good. Yeah. You should have told me first. I would have combed my hair, worn a new shirt.
You look otherwise also.
Just to put India in the global perspective. Just to put ourselves in a global perspective. When I was doing this with one of my a student who I am helping with a PhD, her reaction was, isn't this a totally misfit curve that you're putting up over here? And I immediately agreed with her, because she told me that, listen, the collaterals of every country is so different from the others. So how can you talk in terms of putting up a curve like this? But I just wanted to have the numbers with you. And therefore, I brought this up over here. And her objection was also based on, isn't there a differential in the currencies? Isn't there a differential in the international trade? So I'm saying all these things to you because I need you to look at this graph and treat it with a pinch of salt, okay? More than a pinch of salt also. So don't say 7.8 is bad when you look at Japan and say 2.4. You've got to look at the two economies in their wholesomeness. Okay, look at them holistically and then make a comparison between 2.4% and 7.8%. But what I wanted to share with you is that major countries of the world are going through this price rise situation in their context. Okay, whatever, cultural context, financial context, but they are experiencing that. And look at the bottom. Look at who's at the bottom. Okay, that was not deliberately done. The data that I got hold of here from flaticon.com pointed out to this. Okay, I was trying to get hold of Ukraine, but Ukraine would have been before the war, before the invasion. If anyone gets Ukraine data, just share with me. Causes. And the consequence of monetary and fiscal policy expanding. That means government going and becoming dildar, okay, becoming open-fisted, and the monetary policy going easy, not hiking the interest rates during that period of time. Or Biden, on becoming president, gives every American a check. And in India, the fiscal stimulus, the stimulus given to people without proper income and proper employment. It is food that I'm concerned with. In the 20s, early 20s till 2013, it was demand driven. Now you know these words, right? You got that picture in your mind. And demand driven because India's middle class was growing, jobs were being created, our consumption habits were changing. Okay, we were looking at health. Okay, there's a nice paper that I'll share with you. I'll show you where the paper is, where that person talks in terms of inflation and nutrition. Okay, and from there I picked up this idea. But in the current scenario, when food inflation is at 8.38%, it is more supply driven. Supply is going down. And that is why you saw the government of India announce a ban on wheat exports. And yesterday it announced a restriction on sugar exports. Okay, edible oils have to be imported in large amounts because it is a major contributor. If you remember that entire CPI breakdown that I showed you, you'll find edible oils also being an important part over there. Yeah, 90% of our edible oils are imported. And to our bad luck, this has happened. Indonesia has curbed its exports. Malaysia has curbed its exports. Ukraine naturally had to curb the exports in the form because of the war and the sanction. And the South American economies, especially those along the Pacific, they have been experiencing dry weather and their soya bean cultivation has been affected. And because of that, the edible oil is not being produced. Some of these countries have also begun to use it for ethanol, okay, for the other things, and therefore there'll be a problem happening over here. Crude oil, that was expected. Huh? Crude oil has to be a major driver of inflation. And post the Ukrainian invasion, the shortages have become very startling. Butter prices have gone up, and because of the sanctions, it's become even more acute. Here is what I want you to look at. Remember those columns I had shown you? Monetary policy, demand pull, monetary policy, cost push. Here are some ideas that I share with the students and tell them these are things that could be done by the monetary authority through policy to control demand pull and cost push. And mind you, these are not watertight compartments. What you do to control demand pull can have a backlash on cost push. Okay, so can you see you have to walk a tightrope and make sure that what you're doing to control cost push is not going to damage demand pull. I'm keeping this up for a few seconds. Is there any abbreviation? I've done this deliberately. Yeah? Any abbreviation that you cannot understand and you want me to give you the abbreviation. The dynamics, as you go further down, you'll see the dynamics working themselves out. Any abbreviations, feel free to ask me. I've done that deliberately, so that you have to talk. Technical term, those of you who are interested in doing this at your leisure, remember Rajesh said that this will go up. You can look at this at your own leisure. So you're not asking me, I'm going to the next slide. Huh? This is monetary authority looking at those.
Somebody wants to know about CCC.
Credit creating capacity. Rajesh.
Yeah, thanks.
Credit creating capacity. Any other abbreviation?
No, not yet. OMO.
Open market operations.
Yeah.
Open market operations, huh?
I think there is another question which maybe after this you can, after the presentation you can take.
Yes, yes, yes. Now this is fiscal authority. So in our country, finance minister, what could her office do to control demand pull and to control cost push? Not to eliminate, please, please, please do not eliminate inflation. You eliminate inflation, you are going into deflation, and deflation will take your country down the drain. Any abbreviation, any short forms?
No, no.
This is what? Piyush Goyal. The Commerce Minister. This one I'm telling you because I don't think it's a universal abbreviation. Ease of doing business. Ease of doing business. Where's that wheat thing over here? Anyone spot it? Wheat has been banned. No? Anyone notice it, Rajesh?
No, there's no notice here.
Cost push, here it is.
Yeah, it's here.
Enough exports. What do we do, no? And the best prognosis that we can suggest over here is that the monetary authority and the fiscal authority with the commercial authority work in tandem. RBI has done so. It has raised the repo rate as well as the cash reserve ratio. I'm sorry, I'm throwing jargon at those of you who are not familiar with these words. But then the time constraint is there, no? But you can do this at your own pace. Huh? The government of India, both the finance minister and the commerce minister, have indulged in these things. They've cut central excise duty on petrol and diesel. They've waived custom duties on coking. That's not a spelling mistake. Huh? That's the way it's pronounced, it seems. Those of you from the engineering world will know that. And also on imported oil, edible oils, the duty has been waived. Exports, you ban one, you restrict the other. This is in anticipation of the festival season that's coming up. Huh? I was reading today's paper, and that's what that economist was saying, that in anticipation of the festival, we are about to enter the festival season, beginning with Ganpati and all those things. Then to make sure that we don't land into that mess, the sugar restriction is coming up. And fertilizer price rise has been absorbed by the government of India. There are figures, how much is the government of India absorbing and all is there. What are our concerns? Lending rates have gone up. These are numbers that I could get from the newspaper. Or from the India data, much that I'm presenting to you is from the newspapers. And I am basically an Indian Express reader from my youthful days. But on the deposit rates going up, there are not very many slides, not very many patches that I can put up over there. This is all that I got. How much Bandhan Bank and all have pushed it up by, I couldn't get that data. But those of you are given to research, these are research topics that you could take up. Corporate profitability is mixed. Big firms will gain, small firms will suffer. FMCG companies have begun to increase prices or reduce pack size. And these are two new words that I learned. I learned these words. I never knew these words. Shrinkflation, in a paper written by Siddhi. Siddhi is a student from St. Xavier's College. After a paper was published in Money Control, she wrote to me to tell me, please read my article. And when I read it, I thanked her for teaching me this word, shrinkflation, that they created for reducing the size of packs. It's also called damaging reduction. Investors will stay away because of reduced returns. You'll go into speculation, especially gold. So money on the consumption front, real consumption front will reduce. And if you raise the interest rates, cost push inflation will take place. And we remember we said that cost push inflation is worse off than demand pull inflation. Purchasing powers are reduced. The poor are badly hit. People with fixed income groups, they are also hit. EMIs will become more expensive against the same loan. This I thought I should bring it in because I'm hoping that somebody who is running the kitchen will begin to realize that very silently prices have gone up.
Yep.
And we are not at all, worried about that, taking to the streets about it.
Yeah.
I deliberately bought this Uber thing. Okay, I found in one corner of the newspaper. And I said, even these people are looking at.
Yeah, Professor Menezes, I just paid 1,003 rupees for a gas cylinder day before yesterday.
Oh,
in
more than this,
Mumbai.
huh?
1003.
In Mumbai?
In Mumbai, yeah.
Oh. And not in
BPC.
black, no? It's not that you were buttering up somebody.
No, official.
The official
1003,
rate.
one, that computerized receipt you
Ah,
get.
you got a receipt also.
Yes. And it's shocking in the sense that for a large family, where you consume nearly 2 cylinders a month, your fuel cost has risen in about a year or two by nearly 100%. We used to pay 540 rupees, and now it is 1003.
You wait for my last slide, huh, Rajesh?
Sure, sir.
High inflation rates. Savers become worse off. Okay, sorry, I'm not going to explaining because of the time. Borrowers become, savers become worse off. Borrowers become better off, huh? Ulta. Because we expect higher inflation rates, I told you we go into speculation, we go into hoarding, and that triggers the inflation spiral. I'm not got the time, but balance of payment issues will emerge and get aggravated. This is a whole theory by itself. Though without macroeconomics, there's a whole theory by itself. When the marginal propensity to consume falls, like if you don't buy the cylinder next month, a multiplier effect of the national income will start slowing down. So here my conclusion, let me wrap up by just summarizing whatever I shared with you. And I'm telling you, inflation is not price volatility. Between the two, you got to be careful of cost push inflation, but they together in tandem create the inflationary spiral. WPI is just an academic number today. CPI is more the policy number, but core inflation is without the price of the cylinders that you were talking about just now. Cost of living has increased significantly. Again, you can see what the gentleman was saying about the price of the cylinders. Loan rates have risen. EMIs are becoming burdensome. The poor and fixed income people are really struggling. Teachers get a fixed income, huh? So please pity us. Coordination between monetary, fiscal, and commercial policies are required. And as a parting, I would like to share this with you, that from the JBIMS batch 2017-19, these two students, along with me, we prepared a paper, The Coining of an Economy, When, Why, and How. And this was something that I had imagined in a classroom about 10 years ago when I was teaching. And I said to myself, why did the 5 rupee paper note be converted into a metal coin? Okay, and I kept on pondering over this, and I remember telling the Jamdar Bazaar students this, and these two fellows said, let's research on this. And our hypothesis was, an economy coins its lowest, and that time I'm saying 5 rupees was the lowest paper currency. You convert it into a coin, because now you're saying the least transaction rates are going to be 5 rupees. So we looked at a lot of data, but we could not conclusively validate the hypotheses. The paper is published, but without the conclusive, without conclusively, emphatically validating the hypotheses. But this was my takeaway, in spite of not validating it, that inflation very subtly and surely has the knack to make new high prices the new normal. So there will come a time when you will not tell anybody that you're paying 1,000 rupees for that cylinder. Because it chalta hai, you have to buy it. It becomes a new normal. But I do hope that this sharing with you has tweaked your curiosity and challenged you to unravel this enigma called inflation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, for a very, very simple, you have made it so simple and interesting and practical presentation, which everybody was so into and involved in the whole presentation. Thank you very much for spending time with us. Now I will take some of the questions which are already there in the chat box.
Yes.
So, and then I can request some of the participants also to raise hands, but first the chat box. So first question, which is asked by Shang, I don't know, this is the name which appears here. Where does India stand on inflation category, and what is in store for us in the near future? how does it affect Sensex?
When it comes to the near future, you get ready to pay a little more for that cylinder. Prices are not going to come down. Okay. Can I stop sharing?
Sure, sir, sure.
Prices are not going to come down. Okay, let's not live in a fool's paradise. Prices are not going to come down. So in the near future, you'll be ready to pay more. As far as the Sensex is concerned, I don't think the Sensex is directly influenced by inflation. Okay, but if you go the roundabout route and show that because of inflation, profitability of a company is getting affected, then your Sensex will get affected. So it's a roundabout route that you'll have to take to understand that concept. There's no direct connection, at least according to my limited reading, between inflation and the Sensex.
And next question is from our Professor Murthy from ITM College and our EC member also earlier. How is the inflation in Bangladesh and Pakistan, our neighbors? Sri Lanka is passing through a crisis.
1 minute, just someone tell me how to come out of this. I forgot. I want to show myself.
So go to the share screen and say stop sharing.
Yeah. I got it.
Yeah.
Sorry. I was not using it for a long time. No?
Yes.
Yeah. I think Sri Lanka, Bangladesh is doing well. Okay. Pakistan is now yet in the throes of that political upheaval that took place with the Prime Minister changing. And they have always been on the bad side of the terrorist problem of security problems. So as far as Bangladesh is concerned, I think Bangladesh is waking up India, giving India a knock on a head and telling India, wake up. Okay, if you look at the HDI figures, you look at all the other figures, Bangladesh is, if not on par, is slightly above India. So even as far as inflation is concerned, I think they're much better off than India. Pakistan is yet in flux. So I won't be able to comment on Pakistan. And I need to say this in public. Somebody was asking me this yesterday. India is not going down the Sri Lanka route. We are too big to fail, if you remember that book. Okay, we are too big to fail. Okay, we won't.
And then there's a question. It says, just a minute. It says, is there any example of demand pull inflation in the recent past? I thought it's already dead and buried.
Yeah, when the food inflation, no?
Yeah,
the middle class grows in any economy. Yeah? That's what happening in Bangladesh also. When the middle class grows, demand, no? That's the aspiration, no? The aspiration of the people to build up their consumption basket. I want to ape a better living style, and therefore, come hell or high waters, I beg, borrow, steal, and live a higher income. So, demand pull inflation is very closely connected to globalization. I'm giving a very sociological twist. Huh? The middle class grows, demand pull.
So Dr. Balamurugan has another question where it says, while possible inflationary mitigation measures are limited and all economists know those, how can we judge some economists as efficient, brilliant among available?
I think the brilliance and efficiency, I would boil those two words to effective. That's more important. And why am I saying effective? Because of what I read once in a convent, in Kanusa convent in Mahim. I had gone there for some work with my sisters. And up the stairs, I read this. I hope I can recall it correctly. Being efficient is doing things right. Being effective is doing the right thing. Okay, I got it right. Huh? Being effective is doing the right thing. So I would prefer, I would not worry about their brilliance and all those words. Are they effective? Are they able to control inflation? Are they keeping inflation to the target that the economy requires? Then I would say it's good. And, especially if they are people-centric, if their thoughts are people-centric and not divisive, not breaking up societies and all those things, I would be in favor of such an economist.
So thank you, sir. That is and that's the end of the questions in the chat box. If somebody else has any other question, one can, sir.
Professor, my question was that people who have retired and who, unlike currently teaching professors, don't get fixed salary, their incomes have been reducing now with fixed deposit rates at 5.5% or less and markets also slower, etc. So what is the way out in that case? How to combat this 7% of inflation? We are put
my
into very
wicked answer
difficult
would be-
situation.
my
And
wicked
at a
answer would be
policy
consume
level,
less.
sir, there is never ever a mention in budget after budget. I think this senior citizen segment is completely ignored.
Yes, sir.
I mean, you look at these deductions that are allowed, etc., etc. They virtually remain stagnant, while the income, fixed income instruments are returns are reduced, have reduced considerably. So love and fresh air is only the answer.
TLC, tender loving care, we call it.
Tender loving
TLC.
care. So I think it's some sort of a blind spot in our policy, and
A blinded spot. Let's not say
blinded.
It's blinded. Yeah. You overlook that deliberately.
Because the number, with the defense people got their OROPs, one rank, one post, and so on. But then everyone is not so fortunate as that.
Yeah.
And so people who don't get pension, they're really in a very bad soup.
And anybody after 2005 employed, no pension.
No pension.
Yeah. I jokingly tell my students when you bring the dictionary, put a garland on the word pension. No, it is going to disappear from the dictionary.
No, therefore the lesson for young people is that they got to save much more than what we did.
Yeah.
And if they think their incomes are higher, and if they're spending it all, they'll be worse off. Take up the cue from what you said earlier, the inflation, people who borrow,
savers will suffer.
So instead, but people, now going to live longer, and therefore they have their saving rate has to go up, because the corpuses they will require would be far larger with the lower returns, etc. So there is a strong case.
Sir,
so
I hope somebody is able to make a study on pension funds and the killing of pension.
Yeah.
Okay. The rising of pension funds and the killing of pensions.
Yeah.
There's a correlation.
So I think people generally feel they're earning much more salaries, and they tend to spend, and
they're deluded. They're living in a delusional
but they're living in a fool's paradise, because it will hit them. Yeah.
So thanks, sir. And if any question is there from anyone, that is welcome. Otherwise, I think we are dot on time. Thank you very much, sir. On behalf of our president, Dr. Kavita Lagate, I thank you for spending time for Bombay Management Association, enlightening us with the latest, happenings which are there, and also some of the concepts. So I thank our past president Inderpal ji for taking out time and attending all the sessions. He has been very active in all sessions. And our EC member, Dr. Jagmohan, and Professor Murthy, who has joined for the session. In between, Dr. Kavita Lagate also came.
Yeah, she was there.
I thank you. Yes, she was there. I know. And also the BMS staff for arranging these sessions very, very regularly and diligently. So thank you very much for sir. I just want to remind the participants that on 3rd of June at 6 p.m. we will have another session of Friday Fundamentals from an international speaker, Mr. Nikhil Desai. The session is in pursuit of excellence, unleashing the potential in you and your organization. An interesting session. So please join us for that session also. Thank you very much, sir.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
I'll go now.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.